The Karateka Challenge. The dojo was packed that afternoon in Hong Kong. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and worn leather, as the students prepared for another training session under the supervision of Bruce Lee. He watched each movement with sharp eyes, correcting postures, adjusting strikes, always with surgical precision. But that day, something different would happen. A tall man, with broad shoulders and an arrogant expression, entered the room. It was Kenji Tanaka, a Japanese karate champion who had traveled there to test the legendary Bruce Lee. He didn't come alone, he brought with him an entourage of admirers, all eager to see the confrontation. Tanaka approached with firm steps, his impeccably white gi contrasting with his tan skin. "They say you're fast, Lee-san," said Tanaka, crossing his arms. "But speed without strength is like a tiger without claws. I want to see if your techniques are as sharp as your tongue." Bruce didn't move. He just tilted his head slightly, as if evaluating a random student. "Did you come a long way to tell me that?" he replied, his voice calm, almost amused. "Or to learn?" Tanaka let out a dry laugh. "Learn? I'm the champion of the Osaka tournament. I've defeated men you wouldn't dream of facing." He puffed out his chest, showing a scar on his forearm. "That mark? It was a Muay Thai fighter who tried to take me down. It didn't last 3 seconds." Bruce smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Show off." The word fell like a blade into the silence of the dojo. Tanaka's students exchanged nervous glances. The champion, in turn, stiffened, his fists clenching involuntarily. "What?" he growled. "You like showing off your scars," Bruce continued, still calm. "But scars don't win fights. And brute strength, well, brute strength has its weaknesses." Tanaka couldn't take it. With a scream, he rushed forward, throwing a punch straight at Bruce's face. It was a powerful blow, loaded with years of training, but Bruce wasn't there when the fist arrived. In an almost imperceptible movement, he dodged to the side, grabbing Tanaka's wrist with one hand while the other delivered a precise blow to the karateka's elbow. A sharp crack echoed through the hall. Tanaka screamed, more in surprise than pain, and stepped back, holding his arm. You broke my arm," he gasped, eyes wide. Bruce shook his head. "No. I just showed you where your strength becomes weakness." He pointed at Tanaka's elbow. "Your karate is powerful, but it relies too much on rigidity. When you attack with full force, your body becomes tense, predictable. And a predictable fighter is a defeated fighter." Tanaka tried to compose himself, but his arm hung uselessly at his side. The pain was real, but the humiliation was worse. "That's not fair," he spat. "You used a trick." Bruce crossed his arms, now with a serious expression. "There are no tricks in fighting. There is only knowledge. You came here to test me, but you were the one tested." He turned to Tanaka's students, who watched in shock. True martial art is not about showing off scars or titles. It's about understanding your limits and overcoming them. Tanaka lowered his head, embarrassed. His followers helped him to his feet, and he limped out of the dojo, without looking back. But before crossing the door, Bruce called him. "Tanaka-san." The karateka stopped, tense. "If you really want to learn, come back tomorrow. No arrogance. No showing off. Just a desire to grow." Tanaka didn't respond. But the next day, he came back. And this time, there were no scars to show, just a man willing to learn. The path of humility. The following days at Bruce Lee's dojo were marked by a silent but profound change. Tanaka, once a spectacle of violence and pride, now arrived early, knelt in seiza before training began, and watched Bruce's every move with almost reverent attention. There were no more provocations, no veiled challenges, just the sound of bare feet on the mat and the controlled breathing of someone learning to master not just their body, but their own mind. Bruce, in turn, didn't patronize him. He demanded of him the same things he demanded of any student: precision, discipline, respect. But there was something different about his approach with Tanaka. He wasn't just a master correcting a pupil, he was a man who recognized in another the same flame that had once consumed him, the thirst to prove something, even if it was just for himself. "You hold your fist like you're afraid of hurting someone," Bruce said one morning, interrupting Tanaka's Kihen. "But a blow isn't struck with hesitation. It's struck with intent. If you don't believe in what you're doing, why should you expect your opponent to believe it?" Tanaka gritted his teeth but didn't retort. He just adjusted his posture and repeated the movement, this time more firmly. "Better," Bruce nodded. "But it's still not enough. The strength comes from here." He touched his own chest, over his heart. "Not from here." And he patted Tanaka's temple. The former street karateka looked down, but something in his expression softened. For the first time, perhaps, he understood that the real fight was not against an opponent, but against one's own limitations, physical, mental, emotional. The unexpected challenge. 2 weeks later, a group of Muay Thai fighters arrived in Hong Kong for an exhibition. They were men of feared reputation, known for their brutality and relentless technique. One of them, a tall Thai man named Somchai, had heard of Bruce Lee and his unorthodox style. He did not believe that Jeet Kune Do could be a match for the ancient art of his people. "They say you're fast," said Somchai, standing at the entrance to the dojo, his arms crossed over his muscular chest. "But speed without power is like a bird without wings. You can fly, but you won't get far." Bruce, who was adjusting his students' headbands, looked up calmly. "And power without speed is like a blind bull. It runs hard, but it doesn't know where." Somchai laughed, a low, challenging sound. "Then let's see who hits the target first." The news spread quickly. In less than an hour, the dojo was packed, students, onlookers, even some of Bruce's old rivals, who had come to see if the little dragon would finally meet his end. Tanaka was between them, tense, his fists clenched. He was no longer the man who had arrived there full of arrogance, but he still felt the weight of doubt. What if Bruce loses? What if everything he taught us is not enough? Bruce, however, seemed unfazed. As spectators formed a circle on the mat, he stretched with fluid movements, as if he were alone in the dojo. "Rules?" asked Somchai, flexing his knees. "None," replied Bruce. "Just the respect of not killing each other." The Thai smiled, showing slightly yellowed teeth. "Fair enough." The dance of death. The first blow came quickly, a roundhouse kick from Somchai, aimed at Bruce's head. But before the Thai's foot had completed the arc, Bruce had already moved, dodging with a sidestep and counterattacking with a direct punch that connected with Somchai's solar plexus. The impact made the big man take a step back, but he recovered almost instantly, spinning for a new attack. This time, Bruce didn't dodge. Instead, he intercepted the kick with a forearm block and, in one continuous movement, grabbed Somchai's leg and took him down with a sweep. The Thai fell on his back, but rolled to the side and jumped to his feet, his eyes now burning with fury. "That's not Muay Thai," he growled. "No," Bruce agreed. "It's Jeet Kune Do. The art of intercepting." Somchai advanced again, this time with a combination of punches and elbows. Bruce dodged and counterattacked, but the Thai was tougher than he looked. One of the blows hit Bruce's shoulder, making him flinch. The crowd murmured. Tanaka felt his heart race. Then, in an instant, the dynamic changed. Somchai tried a clinch, grabbing Bruce by the neck to throw knees. But Bruce couldn't resist. Instead, he used his opponent's own momentum to spin, freeing himself from the hold and applying an armbar that forced Somchai to his knees. The Thai tried to get up, but Bruce was already behind him, with an arm around his neck. "Surrender," Bruce said, his voice calm, almost gentle. Somchai struggled, but the pressure was relentless. Finally, with a grunt of frustration, he hit the mat twice. Bruce released him immediately and reached out his hand to help him up. Somchai hesitated, but accepted the gesture. When he stood, there was something new in his gaze, no longer disdain, but respect. "You're different from what I expected," he admitted. "And you fight better than I imagined," Bruce replied. "But the fight isn't about who's stronger. It's about who's willing to learn." Somchai nodded, touching his own neck where the key had been applied. "Maybe I'll come back to learn from you." Bruce smiled. "There's always room for one more student." The legacy. Over time, Bruce Lee's dojo became more than a place of training, it was a refuge for those who sought something beyond violence. Tanaka, who had once arrived there full of scars and pride, became one of the most dedicated instructors, teaching not only techniques, but the philosophy behind them. "The fight doesn't end when you win," he told the new students. "It ends when you understand that there is nothing to prove. Just to grow." Bruce watched everything with satisfaction. He was no longer the impetuous young man who challenged the world to prove his worth. Now, I understood that true victory was not in defeating others, but in inspiring them to surpass themselves. One night, while closing the dojo, Tanaka found him standing in the doorway, looking at the lights of Hong Kong. "Do you think they really understand?" asked Tanaka. "What does Jeet Kune do?" Bruce smiled, his eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Some understand. Others just feel. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The road is long, and each step is a lesson." And so, under the Hong Kong sky, the story of Bruce Lee and his students continued, not as a legend of invincibility, but as a testament that true strength lies in the ability to change, to learn, to start over. End. The legacy that doesn't end. The following years were marked by a strange stillness, as if time itself was breathing more slowly around Bruce Lee. The dojo, once a place of screams and sweat, now echoed with the sound of light footsteps and suppressed laughter. The students who remained were no longer the same young men eager to prove their strength in street fights. They were men and women who had discovered something deeper, that martial art was not just a set of techniques, but a silent language between bodies and souls. Among them was Mei Ling, a 17-year-old girl who had arrived at the dojo with her fists clenched and her eyes full of tears. His father, a cloth merchant, had been beaten by members of a local triad after refusing to pay protection. She wanted revenge. But Bruce, instead of teaching her how to strike more accurately, sat her down on the mat and said, "Anger is like a fire. If you feed it, it consumes everything. But if you control it, it can heat your home." Mei Ling didn't understand right away. For weeks, he trained with a fury that scared even veterans. Until, one afternoon, while practicing kicks against the sandbag, he realized that his movements were mechanical, empty. That's when Tanaka, watching from afar, threw a rock towards him. She dodged on instinct, but the stone ricocheted and hit her shoulder. The pain was sharp, but what made her stop was Tanaka's expression. There was no triumph in his eyes, just a silent question. "Were you fighting the bag or yourself?" he asked. Mei Ling lowered her arms. That night, he cried in the locker room, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. And for the first time, he felt something different, not the desire to destroy, but the need to understand. Bruce, who had watched everything from afar, only approached when she was already standing, wiping her face. "Now you're ready," he said. Meanwhile, Hong Kong was seething with tensions that went beyond street fighting. The city was a melting pot of cultures, where the ancient and the modern clashed daily. The British maintained their dominance, but in the shadows, the triads grew, fueled by greed and fear. Bruce knew he couldn't ignore that. Not when his students were beginning to disappear, forcibly recruited to work on docks controlled by organized crime. One night, after a particularly intense class, Tanaka found him sharpening a kitchen knife with almost ritualistic concentration. "You can't fight them all," said Tanaka. Bruce didn't look up. "I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to show them that they don't need fear to live." The next day, Bruce and a group of his most experienced students, including Mei Ling, now more composed but no less determined, headed for the Kowloon Pier. There were no weapons, just their trained bodies and one certainty, that violence, when inevitable, should be used to protect, not to dominate. The confrontation was quick. The men of the Triad, accustomed to intimidating with knives and chains, did not expect to find opponents who did not back down, but neither did they seek blood. Bruce disarmed the leader with one fluid movement, pressing him to the ground without breaking his bones. "You have two choices," he said, his voice as calm as the surface of a lake. "They could continue like this and end up dead or imprisoned. Or they could use that energy to build something." The leader, a man with a scarred face, spat on the ground. "And who are you to tell us what to do?" Bruce smiled. "No one. But I was once like you. And look at me now." The man hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of something he couldn't name. Maybe respect. Maybe hope. The following months brought subtle changes. Some of the Triad men appeared at the dojo, not as enemies, but as reluctant students. They weren't welcomed with open arms, some of the veterans still looked at them suspiciously, but Bruce insisted. "If we want to change the world, we need to start with those who need to change most." Not everyone stayed. Some returned to crime, unable to abandon what they knew. But others remained, and over time, their scars began to tell different stories. It was one autumn morning that Bruce received the news. A film studio in Hollywood invited him to play a role in a film. It wasn't the lead role, not yet, but it was a chance. Tanaka, upon hearing the news, frowned. And the dojo? Bruce looked at the wooden walls, at the students training in silence, at Mei Ling, who was now teaching the beginners with the same patience he once had. The dojo is not a place. It is what we carry inside us. He left, but he left something behind, not just techniques, but a philosophy. And when, years later, the world would know him as a film legend, those who had trained with him in Hong Kong would know the truth. That before being a star, Bruce Lee was a teacher. And that his greatest teaching was not in the blows, but in the way he approached life, with curiosity, respect, and the courage to change. The dojo remained standing. Mei Ling took over his direction, and Tanaka, now with gray hair, still showed up to train. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the sea, they swore they heard a familiar laugh echoing between blows. And so, the story is not over. It just transformed, like everything that is alive.